Good afternoon, everybody. I trust that you had a nice break and you've had something to eat and you are a little bit more refreshed and revitalized. And if you managed to squeeze in some networking during that time, that's absolutely superb. I'm sure that you can multitask, so you can all get that done. We are privileged to have with us this afternoon Himanshu Mehrotra. I apologize for the mess up in pronunciation. Director Industry Strategy of Blue Yonder, and Peter van Merode, a Vice President Logistics Industry Strategy, also from Blue Yonder. They are going to be co-presenting on enabling E2E supply chain visibility and execution planning and optimization. And before I hand over the reins to them, I would just like to say a big thank you to Blue Yonder for the sponsorship of SAPEX and this event and for their support over the last couple of years. They've been involved with us for a couple of years now as a sponsor, and we're really, really grateful and appreciate their support from an ongoing basis. So I'm going to hand over to Peter, who's going to be kickstarting the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your kind words, and happy to support SAPEX in South Africa, for us an important market. We also have our marketing people joining this session, and the first request was to ask you after this session to go to our booth, visit our booth. Yeah? While for most of you it's afternoon, good afternoon, for Himanshu and for me it's still good morning, although late morning, because we're presenting out of Europe. Himanshu is Solution Executive responsible for supply chain orchestration and visibility, and he is Transportation Management expert with a long history in transportation management. And I am working out of Eindhoven, the Netherlands. I could understand South African, but I don't speak South African. My expertise area is warehouse management, and I'm a logistics expert, especially specialized in intra-DC logistics. Now, before we have 45 minutes, and we have split this presentation in two pieces, or actually in three pieces. First, I start with a brief introduction of who Blue Yonder is and what our ultimate dream is in helping our customers optimizing supply chains. A couple of slides, and then Himanshu is going to talk about end-to-end supply chain orchestration. And actually, he's using a very urgent and a very recent business case that we worked on with a company called Becton Dickinson, and that is all to do with supply chain mechanisms for COVID medicine or vaccine handling. So that's a very actual presentation. And then I complete the presentation talking about work that we're doing with a global 3PL on the optimization of intra-warehouse logistics in the area of tasking and robotics integration. So that's us. That's the program for today. But let's first talk a bit about Blue Yonder. I guess there are many supply chain veterans in this audience. I worked in South Africa a couple of 10 years ago, and I admired, let's say, the supply chain expertise and the supply chain experience. Hold on, I need to do something. There you go. That I met a lot of veterans, a lot of good expertise. And many of these veterans will remember companies like E2E, Digitisation, Red Prairie. And basically, Blue Yonder is the amalgamation of all these companies into what first was JDA software. Now, as JDA, we found that the future of use of our software was not just in the application strength that we offered, but was also in, let's say, the modernization, the application of artificial intelligence, the use of machine learning, the ability to ingest data, to digest data, to transform data into algorithms and optimize supply chains. And we felt that we needed to facilitate all of this in a better manner than just offering supply chain functionality. And we've been transforming ourselves into what I would call a supply chain platform company. So it's not anymore about just transportation management, warehouse management, or demand planning. It's also about how can you ingest data, how can you respond to data, how can you respond to supply chain mechanisms, how do you create resilience. And that means that we have created a platform, and our applications and other applications and your own applications run on top of this platform. And in that today, we talk about transportation, we talk about warehouse, but obviously as a supply chain company, we also deal with manufacturing operations, and we also deal with optimizing retail operations. Few numbers, large global customer, $1 billion plus company, and we want to be good in everything that we do, which means that in those magic quadrants that matter to our business, we want to be in the visionary or in the leadership quadrant, and we are. What's also important is that we don't just innovate with our customers, we also innovate ourselves every time again. And we translate that into, let's say, new developments and concepts that we bring to the market. So we're pretty actively in measuring our patents granted and our patents pending to see how our output of our innovation cycles and our development cycles is. That's enough about the company. What's going on in our business? And we want to look back a bit. Traditionally, our applications were really inside out. We would think what's good for the industry. We would develop platforms, and we would develop applications, and we bring them out. Very efficiency focused. In many cases, lean was the word that we were dealing with, and consumer insights were mostly our customers' problems and not really our applications' problems. Also, we would have different applications for different channels. We would deal with e-commerce channels in a different manner than what we deal with typically wholesale channels or manufacturing or retail channels. And our applications were grown mostly by creating historical functionality. They were large, they were rigid, and they were not very flexible. So if you want to change something or if you want to implement new functionality, you have to migrate or upgrade to a later version, which was always a painful thing. And then obviously intelligence, very sequential, rule-based, very fixed, and not easy to influence. Now that's all changing. Today, customer centricity is key. So we have to think inside out. The customer experience counts, and that makes that the customer defines how they want to be served, but also then what applications are relevant to that. I think also that these applications don't deal with different channels anymore. Multiple inventory points, one single view of the end-to-end supply chain and how that's being orchestrated, and that requires that the applications need to be managed, need to be capable of managing these different channels in one application. Data is relevant. Data for today, data from manufacturers. You need to be connected. You need to be able to ingest data. You need to be able to manage data. You need to be able to deal with point-to-point data, streaming data, IoT, and needs to be flexible because it can change every day. You need to add it every day. And then last, having data is great, but what are you going to do with it? So you need to be intelligent and adaptive, being able to modify your applications or modify the functionality or respond to data effects or to respond to supply chain effects in an instant manner without having to reprogram your application or go back to your development team. The application needs to sense changes in your supply chain by monitoring the data and by analyzing the data, and needs to respond to that in a more or less automated manner. And that is what we call our platform. So again, we have a platform with applications on top of that, retail applications, manufacturing planning applications, supply chain execution applications. Think about transportation management, think about warehouse management. And what we add to that is a series of common components. So all these applications from the outside look the same, different functionality. From the outside look the same, and they offer all the same type of platform services. Connectivity. All API driven, bidirectional input, output, very well defined APIs. So if you want to change functionality, if you want to enter data, If you want to add functionality, you can use our API services to add functionality to the applications or change the behavior of the applications. One entry point, whether you want to use demand, whether you want to use warehouse management, transportation management, identity services are the same all over our applications. And the same with tenancy, multi-tenant, single tenant, we all run it. Data platform, when you want to deal with data, one version of the data, whatever application you use, there's data management services in there. There's master data management services in there, which means that whatever application you use, you always use the same set of data, and there's only one version of the truth. Deployment. I think that's very important as well. In the old days, when we would add functionality, you would move from one version of the software to another version of the software by simply migrating. And especially in supply chain execution, transportation management, warehouse management, that was a painful step because there were lots of customizations. And that would mean that migrating to a new version was a lengthy enterprise, risky, and a lot of people wouldn't do it. And because of that, you would never benefit from new developments. You would never benefit from advances in functionality, advances in architecture. And these days, with the move to software as a service, containerized deployments makes that you get a seamless, upgradable system. So when new functionality is added, you simply deploy new functionality, and you always keep track of the latest functionality that we are delivering. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, I mentioned it. These days, you don't only ingest data, you also want to learn from data, and you want to improve your operations. And by doing that, you need those services. They are embedded in our applications. And then last, how do people work with it? How can we improve operations? But also, how do people work in it? And can we learn from the use of our systems with observability services? Can we learn from the use of our applications and optimize the use? So, all Azure-based, Microsoft Azure-based, and for connectivity, the API connectivity, we all use MuleSoft as tool. That allows us to run our own solution on the SaaS platform. They're very extensible, so we don't call it customizations anymore, but when you want to extend the functionality outside our cloud platform, you can do that. You can add own applications, and if there's other applications like from independent software vendors, you can add those as well. Last slide on our journey. So our ultimate dream is that supply chains manage themselves. They become autonomous. So at this moment, they're siloed. Many different processes, manually operated. If you learn from data, you got to change it yourself. But what we want to achieve is by learning from data, we want to make supply chains, first of all, predictive. Analyze patterns, understand what's going on in your supply chain, and know how to respond. And if you know how to respond, you can become prescriptive. So you develop scenarios. You say, well, if this happens in my supply chain, transportation hiccup, weather, congestion on the road, strikes, geopolitical effects, this is how I need to respond. And when you've gone through that, or you've responded to that a couple of times, and you know what the effects are, you can automate that. And by doing that, your supply chain becomes autonomous or self-learning. And that is where today we're going to talk about more. So I give now the mic to Himanshu. He's going to talk about supply chain visibility related to, in this case, a COVID-19 use case. Himanshu.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So in this journey that Peter just mentioned about an autonomous supply chain, end-to-end visibility really plays an extremely important role. And you cannot manage what you cannot really see. So hence, visibility sets the foundation of this digitalization journey that will help to provide the end-to-end supply chain cockpit that basically used to drive value from the supply chains. Next, Peter. So the biggest hurdles in this particular journey is the siloed natures of operations, solutions, and even people. Now, some strategic decisions are being made, but they don't really get rolled down into operational actions. Or logistics is being completely siloed or detached from the manufacturing planning are very, very common examples of these silos. Now, Organizations have implemented various different solutions like demand, warehousing, transport, and so on to make those processes efficient. And they've also integrated them to break these kind of silos. However, because of various different reasons, maybe multiple IT systems, extensive external collaborations like suppliers, customers, 3PLs, 4PLs, it's become extremely difficult for them to get a unified view across the entire processes in the network. Now, this what really does is it leads to the lack of end-to-end visibility. So the fact that how do I actually understand my impact of my sales and operation planning all to my execution, right? So because all of these information are not really visible to me at one time. The next point to that is most of my decision making is very reactive. That means I'm actually acting after the disruption has happened and making it impossible for me to solve that particular disruption more efficiently and with minimum impact. Now, which really leads to the third point, which is I'm not able to meet my customer needs, and hence I'm reducing my service levels, and even to some extent brand erosion is happening. So that's really, I would say, the biggest challenges we see from our customers from having these silos nature. Next, so let's actually understand how is it very relevant for a typical customer. Now, what we'll do is we'll see through the eyes of a customer and how they are using this supply chain control tower solution in this major global pandemic. Now, this particular customer is actually playing an extremely important role in the fight against COVID. Let me introduce to them. We've all been very severely impacted by the current pandemic. And I'm sure, like me, everyone is keeping up to date on the progress of this particular vaccine. Now, this vaccine needs to be delivered and to be administered to all of us. So we have heard news that, okay, some vaccines would be ready next week and we can start seeing that. But there is a massive logistics needed behind that. But also, these vaccines, Peter, can you, next one, please? Yeah. So when these vaccines are delivered to your doctors, to the pharmacies, and so on, these need to be administered. And the administration needs to have these various syringes, needles, and all those kind of very important things that need to be used in delivering those vaccines. Now, this particular customer has been extremely important in the development of this vaccine by providing various medical equipments to the pharma companies, and also will now be providing syringes to administer vaccine to us. Next. This particular customer is Becton Dickinson. It's a global medical technology company with over $16 billion in annual revenue and is serving over 190 countries. If you have ever taken blood tests or or if you have got any injections or anything done, most probably you would have been using one of their products to do that. Now, just yesterday, they published how they are actually getting ready for this vaccine administration, and they are using the Blue Yonder's control tower solution to do so. Next. Now, before they actually started on this journey with the overall control tower, they faced challenges that most organizations face due to multitude of silos in their enterprises. Now, supply chains, even theirs, rely on people, processes, and systems all assigned to them. Sometimes these processes are slower because they involve a lot of manual work and don't utilize meaningful data. Many companies operate today in this way, right? And requiring the individuals to be highly involved. And these workers conduct their jobs with whatever they are given, right? So there are multitude of spreadsheets, report, dashboards, with all very limited visibility into the whole enterprise, with or without basically the data that helps them to understand the priorities that they have, right? So they're used to working to find problems and fix them to the best of their ability, usually limited to their own primary function. So the future is oriented towards an autonomous supply chain, right? Where we will be empowering them with the technology. Now, one of the biggest things that Becton Dickinson asked us to do was to ensure that we are able to enable these workers and these users to provide the whole end-to-end visibility. And this end-to-end visibility needs to get information from multitude of their systems, their suppliers, their carriers, their vendors, all into one single place. And most importantly, it has to be real time, right? Because they have always faced issue that they had a lack of there was a latency in the information that they used to receive, right? Rather than waiting for batch jobs or weekly updates, they wanted everything to be in real time. Finally, all of this information needs to be in one single place so that can collaborate while looking at one single version of the truth. Next. Now, the users want to assess the impact of any disruptions or so on the enterprise and extend this network in real time rather than focusing on these smaller set of functions. They want to be understanding what is really the impact of that disruption. So how is my transport, let it be how is my transport going to be affected from external factors like congestion, delays, or any of that? Or situations like COVID had on Becton Dickinson, there are certain geographies where their manufacturing locations were completely kind of shut down. How would they actually enable global supply chain to do that? So what they did was the visibility helped them to see this issue. Then the solution was, once they have the visibility, it was a processing capability they needed to help their users to prioritize, how do I actually solve that? Because just seeing a disruption isn't good enough. Also, I need to prioritize that. Next. Now, rather than hunt for resolutions to these exceptions, these users expected technology to recommend them based on not only statistical performance, but also detect patterns or capabilities in the data that will help them to determine the optimal outcomes. So the solution, once it has actually prioritized the disruption, also needs to prescribe certain solutions to them, right? And that's will help them to collaborate and orchestrate these resolutions with various different stakeholders. Next, Peter. So this all needs to be empowered by machine learning, right? That can go through various different data stream sources to identify best path forward. Now, the idea here is that once they have responded to a particular disruption, the next time when a similar disruption happens, then the system, the processes, the entire organization is ready for that, because the learning ability would have actually already learned from the past, and when the disruption happens, it could already prescribe that last time you actually solved this issue by maybe a stock transfer or using a different supplier, and how many times it has actually helped you previously, and then it'll prescribe you the same option again. Or if you want to make it really autonomous, could auto execute that, and that's really the whole learn part of it, right? So it's actually going through these various parts to it. Next. So this is where the Blue Yonder Luminate Control Tower comes and helps various different customers like Becton Dickinson. What it does is it brings this real-time supply chain visibility and brings the planning and executions together into one single process, and provides a cognitive control tower that consumes various different digital signals like IoT, social, environmental, and weather. It leverages data science to continuously learn and generate insights and recommendations. Next. So based on this particular control tower, Blue Yonder was able to provide that technology to help succeed Becton Dickinson's control tower goals. And their primary tagline of the whole control tower was they wanted every single unit be visible everywhere and at every moment in the time. And it spans all the way from their suppliers to the final customer, right? So they wanted to establish, so as part of this whole journey, what they did was once they had the visibility, they also started creating various different playbooks that if, say, for example, there is a supply shortage because of a factory shutdown, what would I be doing, right? Similarly, if I have got a supply or ships being late, then how can I actually solve it, right? Now, one of the key things they actually did was they also found out that normally, whenever there were any disruptions, their main object or the main way of solving that was expediting goods from one location to another. And usually this expedition always meant air freight. And their air freight bill was rising. And when they actually implemented the control tower, they realized actually they don't really need to do air freight in many of these situations. And that way, they were able to actually reduce their logistics costs, but also were able to start looking at inventory levels at various different nodes of their supply chain, understand what's really needed versus how much they should be actually having it at every point in their network. Next. So the control tower, so if I go into a little bit detail in terms of what it does do, I wanted to give you some glimpse of that, right? So it basically helps to provide that visibility into inventory, into demand and supply of goods throughout the supply chain, including your own manufacturing sites, your distribution sites, and the network, right, which can be extended all the way to your customers. So you can actually have visibility of what your customers are selling if you wanted to, and also get the actual sales information coming in for you to help understand the end-to-end supply chain. Now, it provides a single data model, as Peter mentioned earlier, that goes across the supply chain. So this really ensures the uniformity and cohesiveness of information coming in. So next. So once it actually provides that visibility, the next thing it really does is it has got an intelligent response framework that helps to find those exceptions, manages those exceptions, and enable these organizations to prioritize what should I be really working on first before moving on to something else based on severity and based on impact, right? Additionally, the prescriptive and predictive analytics enables various different things like what if scenarios, simple simulations in there with using real-time data to understand what the better trade-offs are. Now, this allows the planners to effectively monitor the issues and collaborate with partners to resolve exceptions. Now, I'll just take that example again of Becton Dickinson. When they do air freight, they actually have incorporated or orchestrated an approval workflow within there, so that if anyone has to do an expedited air freight, it's a 2i approach. It basically goes through an approval before it actually executes on there. So again, that helps them to even reduce these issues very, very quickly. Next. Now, sensing and responding to these particular risks and opportunity, all while continuously learning, this is really where the solution starts to come in, right? And I talked about these very much cross-functional collaboration and with extended network of trading partners. So this is where you would work, or Becton Dickinson or any of our customers would be working with their suppliers upstream, so they can actually collaborate with their forecast and their commitments versus similarly from their customers and also the other partners like carriers, right? So it's a very much one single platform where they can actually find out resolutions to issues and orchestrate from one single place itself. Next. Now, this is where the whole continuous learning really comes in, right? So the response framework and these exception management capabilities enable these organizations to start learning, as I mentioned previously, from what's happened previously. So the idea is, again, it's a closed loop cycle. So an exception happening, you respond to it, learn from it. And next time when that happens, you're much better equipped with dealing with those particular exceptions. Right. Next. Now, based on the various different customer examples and value analysis, we have seen a drastic improvement in supply chain costs, right? By preserving cash flows, reducing inventory across all the nodes. And one of the key things, especially in some of the industries, is obsolescence of inventory. So the solution not only reduces inventory levels, but also helps to reduce any wastage of stock inside the network, right? But at the same time, helping to reduce any expedited cost, be it in transport, warehousing, or any of those, right? And finally, one of the biggest improvements we have seen is a huge improvement in efficiencies and planner productivity. And now they really don't have to hunt for information. They don't need to really find out the resolution. All of that information is visible for them, and they can take those actions very quickly. Next. So this is so I wanted to end towards really the whole journey of Becton Dickinson. So we started this journey almost 2.5 years back with us, and throughout this whole process of COVID, since I think the utility of the control tower, especially since January, February, has been immensely very helpful for our customer here. They have been able to find out risk areas, supply risk, customer risk, and still be able to navigate through all of those and serve the major pharmacies and major hospitals and dispensaries all over the world, right? And sorry, Peter. Yeah. So by doing that, so they were able to have the service, meet the service levels, or even better that. But most importantly, they were able to reduce a lot of costs from their supply chain. And finally, it's all about inventory as well, right? So they want to make sure the right inventory is available at the right place, so that they can actually serve those customers in the best possible way. So that's all from me. Peter, back to you.
Thanks, Himanshu. So this was an excellent use case around how we support customers by providing visibility and helping them to orchestrate their supply chains. A part of supply chains are also the inventory locations. And obviously, it's also good to look inside what an inventory location is and how do we manage these locations. So for me, the next part of this session is to look into the warehouse and how we help our customers in optimizing warehouse performance. This is particularly related to work that we have done with DHL Supply Chain, the largest contract logistics company in the world. And we have a co-innovation approach with them where we develop applications together and implement applications together that help them improve their productivity. And in the end, the throughput in the warehouse. Now, if you look to, and we talked already a bit about what's happening in supply chains and the changes in supply chains. Also, the world for warehouse management systems or for inventory management systems is changing as well. In the old days, we would have systems that would manage large DCs, but these days we want to manage basically every inventory location in the warehouse. So whether it's a store, we want to know what's going on. Whether it's a e-commerce fulfillment center or a micro fulfillment center connected to a store with or without automation. Whether you want to do a pop-up store for seasonal goods or whether you want to do cross-docking or flow-through, you need applications that manage what's going on in those inventory locations, but also to manage the transportation between all these inventory locations and to the customer. So it's about bulk transportation, it's about FTL, it's about light transport. It's about BOPIS, it's about how do you deliver last miles, all has to do with how do you manage your inventory. General trends, fulfillment moving closer to the customer. The footprint of fulfillment centers and warehouses is going smaller once you move closer to the customer, and the level of automation is increasing. Scarcity of labor, so more robotics, more automation, whether it's AGVs, whether it's drones for delivery or drones for cycle counting, AGVs in the warehouse. Freight marketplaces, and all has to go green. So this is our world today. And how do we deal with that? And we looked into what does it mean for our applications. So first of all, we take our WMS and our transportation management applications, and obviously to deal with data volumes, to deal with scalability, to achieve things like containerization and one view of end-to-end supply chains. SaaS is the future. You can't do it anymore. So on-prem architectures can deal with the complexity and the sizing issues and the scalability issues of modern applications. And also on-prem applications or on-prem run models are difficult to use when you really want to use artificial intelligence or machine learning tools. So the next stage, the first stage we make with our applications is to move towards SaaS and AI/ML. And then we have added 4 elements to improve, let's say, or to flexibilize and make our execution applications future-proof and offer the functionality and the platforms that are required by our nowadays customer base. The first one is managed by visibility, managed by insight and recommendations. The time that in a warehouse people would have 300 screens and would sort their way through screens to find the most optimal setup to manage the warehouse is gone. The warehouse is run by KPIs, it's run by exceptions, and people respond that way, and the systems need to provide those insights. If possible, not just in the warehouse, but also with all the applications connected to it. So if your demand changes, and that has consequences for the forecast in your warehouse, you want to show that. If there's a workflow that deals with transportation, that deals with demand, that also has consequences for your warehouse, you want to have one workflow that deals with all these components. So how do you deal with robotics and automation? Not just siloed, not just one piece of, not just decide when you have to decide when it goes to a robot or an automation. The system needs to be able to flawlessly figure out how it integrates robotics and automation and how it manages tasks. Fulfillment as a platform. So take in an order, and you want to have full visibility of the inventory in your supply chain and how you can deliver the order at the moment that the order is booked, not at the moment that you have to deliver it. You want to have the full flexibility, and you want to offer the options to the consumer so he can make a choice. And then last, try to flexibilize and try to make more nimble applications. So everything as a service. Allocation is a big portion of work in a warehouse management system. And you don't want to deal with allocation. You don't want to deal with serialization if you don't need it. You don't want to deal with lot control if you don't need it. You don't want to lead with shelf life parameters if you don't need it. Only work with those elements that you need to drive your operation. That makes your applications more nimble. That makes them faster, and it decreases your response time, and it decreases the implementation and, let's say, the continuous rollout complexity. So this is the view of where our applications are going. Now, look a bit about resource orchestration. Shop floor is getting more complex. People running around in the shop floor together with robots, higher levels of automation. People have RDTs, people have glasses, people have voice terminals. How do you deal with that? And then how do you ingest external data, transportation data, marketplace data, weather data, all have an effect. So you need to know your capacity. You need to know the availability of your capacity. What are the constraints? Who can go where? What is available? What is not available? How many people you have? And what the costs are. And that mixed to your inventory availability, you start prioritizing tasks. What's the sequence of the task? What's the tour of the warehouse? Is it an automated task? Can it be done by automation? Can it be done by a robot? Does it need to be done by a human operator? The system sorts out the most optimal sequence, and the system tells however the tasks are going to be executed against the best conditions, the high delivery conditions, and the lowest cost. And that assignment is done by the system as well. And we take that basically out of the traditional WMS system, and we implement that in a SaaS mode, and then you can use it with every other WMS system. So it's an open system. It takes the tasks out of your warehouse management system and then reorganizes the tasks, and it sends it back to the user or to the equipment. So that is what we call resource orchestration. Now, a couple of examples. First is tasking. We take out the tasks and we reorganize the tasks in the right priority to make sure that they're executed in the best way. And I'll come to this later. Robotics Hub. Once you have decided that you are going to use robotics, first of all, you need to onboard them. What's the most optimal setup for robotics? What are the most optimal workflows? But then, obviously, you also need to find the most optimal balance between labor-oriented work and robot-oriented work. So that's what Robotics Hub does. And by mixing these two together, we get what we call resource orchestration, what I just described in my previous slide. And that optimizes your resource capacity in the most optimal manner. Now, talking about tasking, first of all, it runs outside a WMS. It's a SaaS application, and you can link it to virtually every WMS that you have out there. We've linked it to not just our WMSs, but also to WMSs that are run by our competitors and by homegrown WMSs. It changes tasks. It builds tours, and it links tasks together in the most optimal manner, and also taking care of who has to execute the task. The second is it escalates and it de-escalates tasks. So based on due times, receiving goods, trucks leaving, tasks are escalated, de-escalated to make sure that the delivery pattern is met in the most optimal manner. It looks into available capacity, and it plans capacity to make sure that the tasks are blocked and grouped in the right way, and the capacity is smoothed. And last is it can deal with everything that creates escalations. So if there's equipment not available, if trucks comes in late, if people don't show up, the system manages it, and the system manages the tasks in the warehouse to make sure that the operations continues to run smooth. So this is a traditional priority task pattern in a system without workforce management, without Illuminate tasking. So the priorities are chaotic, they change very rapidly, and that makes that the warehouse not always is a very pleasant place to work, and that it really needs good planning and good oversight to manage and make sure that all the goods are delivered in the right way. After tasking, this is what happens. So all the tasks are run smoothly. There are little escalations. There's little or decreased level of replenishment, emergency replenishments, and the system overall makes sure that the site runs smoother than it ran before. This is an example of tasking. And these are live examples taken from DHL sites. The second thing I like to discuss is Robotics Hub. The intent of Robotics Hub is not just to optimize performance, but also to decrease the delivery time, to decrease the implementation time. So it's a tool that allows you to easily integrate with whatever vendor you have, with whatever WMS you use, gives you one view of the warehouse, and it makes that it replaces the typical monotonous and very strenuous work for warehouse employees to robotics work. And as we all know, the robotics level in warehouses is increasing. Speed up time is of key to make it beneficial and to guarantee a good payback and a fast time to value. And this is where this tool helps with. So there's standard APIs with WMSs, standard APIs with many different robotic systems, and it reduces the delivery time. So for instance, if you would do a first time implementation with a WMS and a robotic system, it would easily take you 3 to 4 months. And if you would done this robotic system again or before, then it would decrease that by 90%. So you would go to a week or 2 weeks for an implementation time. Different robotic system, same WMS, decreased by 60%. So from 3 months going to 1 month. Standard APIs, very good visibility, and a way to set up your own workflows and to make sure that the robotic system really deals with the complexity and the process that you have in the warehouse. Now, bringing that all together, the role of the warehouse management system is changing. It's changing to order fulfillment, and SaaS modules like Robotics Hub and Task Management are taking over running the operational side of your warehouse. They take care of your resource balancing, they take care of your allocation, they take care of your labor management, and they take care of dispatching the work to the shop floor. And you can add visibility to that. If you want to have heat mapping systems, add them to it and make sure that you can deal with congestion in the warehouse. If you have labor standards, you can add it to it. Make sure that the resource system manages according to the labor standards. If you want to do space management, add edge data like sensor data, temperature data, dock door data. You can add it, and it all can be taken into account into the AI and ML engine that drives the optimization of your tasks. In a nutshell, this was what I like to present on what's going on in your warehouse and how you can improve warehouse performance. Going back to the start of my presentation, our platform strategy, whatever you've seen today and what we presented, all is based on the same platform. It runs on Luminate, one data management system, one way of looking to data, one way of looking to using the system, one user experience, and one ecosystem that does not only support our applications, but also allows you to support applications developed by yourselves or by your partners. And some nice words of people that responded to press releases and to news around these applications. That was it for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. There was a lot of detail in that. I don't know if it was me, but my brain in the afternoon was struggling to absorb that. We have run out of time for questions, but what I would like to recommend, will there be somebody in the Blue Yonder booth? Is there somebody there now?
Yeah, absolutely. And
okay.
I was kindly asked by Alison to refer to our Blue Yonder booth. People are available and are there to answer further questions. Okay,
perfect. So that would be my recommendation. I think they have lots of really good stuff to share with you, lots of value-adding solutions for your organization. Seems very, very advanced. We've talked about visibility and digitalisation, all those good things during the last day and a half. And I certainly think that they offer that up. So I would encourage you to go there. Please don't forget to take the poll before you leave. We are going into break now until 1:30. So we will see you back here at 1:30. Thank you so much.
Thank you.